for those who don't know, I mean, you have an amazing resume in the bodybuilding media business. 18 years you were the editor of MD, Muscular Development, right?
Yep, 18 years.
How was it? Before you got to MD, how did you begin your journey in bodybuilding? Were you always into writing, or were you into bodybuilding? How did you get into that?
Well, my original exposure to bodybuilding came in 1972. I was a 12-year-old obese kid, and my father was, watching the one black and white TV we had in the family room, and he called me in. He goes, "You got to see this," and it was the 1972 Mr. Olympia. And I walked as soon as I walked into the room. Sergio Oliva was hitting a crab shot, and it was like you just saw this muscle just mound up, and his ears practically disappear behind his traps. And that was the coolest thing in the entire world I had ever seen in my life at that point. So so I said, I got to figure out how do you do this? How do you look like that? How do you get to be a bodybuilder? And there was a whole process of finding out, back, you remember 1972, there's very few gyms. There's not a lot of anything going on about bodybuilding in the mainstream. And I lived in a small town in upstate New York at the time, which was even more cut off, from the real world, where I had even more limited access to anything versus a big city. So yeah, it was a lot of, I remember sending away for the Charles Atlas course in the back of those, Boys Life magazine, or I remember doing some other course I found somewhere, and they were all things that kind of just went around the obvious. Well, you got to lift weights. There's no other way around. There's no other way around it. And then once I accepted that, I had to find a place that had weights, because there was no, gyms. And I eventually found a boxing gym that I trained in, had some weights off into the corner, and I found the guys that owned them or worked out with them, using them. And finally, by the time I was, 13 or so, I was pretty much training regularly, in the gym at least 3 or 4 days a week, trying to learn how to build muscles. And that's where that started. I mean, it was a long time coming.
How did you get to the position, the senior editor of Muscular Development? Because that was a very important position, because MD was, in many regards, it was the magazine. You know what I mean? It was obviously Flex and it was Joe Weider publications, but MD was a very strong opponent. You know what I mean?
At one time, yeah, at one time we were definitely the biggest, bodybuilding magazine. I think we were at like 560 pages. I think was the top. 540 or 560 was as big as we got during my time there. It went significantly downhill after I left the magazine. But basically, I was always into writing. I was always, looking at that as a potential outlet for my creativity. And I started writing about, bodybuilding in the 80s. And when I actually went to prison and met Dan Duchesne in the federal prison camp in Boron,
Why'd you go to
California.
prison?
And when
Oh, why? What did you do?
I had a little white collar issue a long time ago. Let's just say I was more creative for my own than for my own good. But that's all the path. But when there, I met him. I met Dan Duchesne, and you know who he is. And he and I, became friends there, because we were from the same. We knew of each other from Venice. We weren't actually friends in Venice, but we knew of each other. We knew the same people, so it was only natural that we'd fall in there among strangers. And he encouraged me to write, and while I was in there, I was writing by freehand, and I actually got a piece published in a small bodybuilding magazine while I was actually still locked up. And when I got out, Steve Bleckman from Muscular Development had contacted me. Before I went in, I was doing those muscle meals segments for Muscle Magazine with Lou Zwick, cooking the bodybuilder meal of the muscle meal of the week, for American Muscle Magazine. And he wanted a food column, a nutrition column, and he had just acquired the magazine from York Barbell, and he wanted to add a nutrition, cooking column, and approached me to do it. And that was my foot in the door. And from there, I started climbing up. Don Ross was our senior editor for a long time, and he passed away. And when he passed away, there was an opening, and I just kind of happened to fill it. And that's where that came from. So, 18 years, um, in one place. It was the longest job of my career.
When you used to write for MD, right? Did you ever have to kill certain stories, or maybe forced to write certain stories that you didn't want to write?
Yes, I was. Well, forced is a strong is a strong word. Um, I was a loyal soldier to the cause, and basically, that's just how I am. If I work for you, I'm going to give you everything I got. And if you tell me you want something done, if I disagree with it, I'm going to tell you that I disagree with it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do what you want. So yeah, there were times when I was given assignments that I did not agree with, but I did because it was what I was supposed to do.
Interesting. Did you ever feel like upset over a journal, like, because you have a journalistic integrity, obviously. Did you ever feel upset about it?
Yes, absolutely. And kicking and screaming all the way to the editorial process. But at the end of the day, it wasn't my magazine, and it wasn't my position. Senior editor is not editor. Senior editor is not publisher. Senior editor is the second guy on the masthead. The guy above me makes the decisions, and he tells you what to do, and that's what you do.
Interesting. What about when you guys used to have your athletes and MD athletes, right? Did you ever have problems working with somebody, with any of them? Who was like the hardest guy to deal with from your memories?
Steve Bleckman. He was the
Oh
publisher.
man.
Was the hardest guy to deal with. No, the athletes were all great. I got along with all of them. I mean, some I thought probably more so than others, but I mean, they were from Lee Priest and all of them. Flex Wheeler,
Hmm.
Lee Haney. I had a close working relationship with. Mike Menser, I worked with very closely. Ronnie Coleman, I worked with closely for several things. I mean, yeah, we had. Although Ronnie wasn't under contract with MD, we did subsequently we did some work together.
Hmm.
Jay Cutler was a great guy to work with. I used to love
Hmm.
interviewing him and talking to him about stuff. Dexter Jackson was a great guy, and really good sense of humor. All of them. I don't have a bad thing to say about any of those guys. None of them. Not even Sean Ray.
Not even. Why people hate Sean Ray, man? He's all right.
I don't hate Sean Ray. I
Oh
love
man.
Sean Ray. I think Sean Ray is really good for the sport. You need a Sean Ray. I think we're blessed to have him. It would be a much more boring community without him.